2024 and into 2025 has been a little bit rougher on the recruiting industry. One of the reasons we have stayed afloat, so to speak, and stayed above the bar is because of our relationships with people. 10 years ago, people would speak to everybody that walked in the door. They would give them the time of day. And now these poor people, these candidates they don't get replies. The digital noise is a big part of what has changed. There's good and bad with it, in my opinion.
Welcome back to Talent Hunters, where we explore insights and trends shaping the global recruiting and staffing industry. Want to build talented teams that drive your company toward big goals and big growth? Then this podcast is for you. And now, let's join the conversation with today's episode of Talent Hunters, brought to you by HireQuest. Connect with us at hirequest.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Vince Holt, and I'm the host of Talent Hunters. Today, we have Trish Bannister, owner of Snelling Staffing Agency in Northern Colorado, with us. Trish's successful team brings well over 30 years of experience recruiting, training, and retaining to their clients. They specialize in engineering, behavioral health, and accounting, as well as light industrial. Welcome, Trish.
Thanks, Vince. Good to be here.
Oh, so excited to hear your story. So let's start this out right. Tell us a little bit about your background. And good gravy, what got you into the staffing world?
That's a question you ask everybody on the show, right? And we all say the same thing. It just sort of happened. I went to school to be a teacher, and I was in education for 10 or 15 years. I taught, and I also became like curriculum person and did some higher ed administration stuff. And to be perfectly frank, I was with a for-profit higher institution as the campus president, and they hired a boss that I did not care for, and he didn't care for me. We didn't get along very well. And at that point, I started looking around for what to do. And I wasn't even married to my husband yet, my current husband of 10 years. We were just dating. Actually, we weren't even engaged. We were close to engaged. And one day I just got this, I never in my life wanted to own a business, ever. It was not something I wanted to do. It wasn't on my radar, nothing. And I happened to look online for businesses for sale. And lo and behold, I saw a recruiting and staffing company for sale here in Northern Colorado. One thing led to another. We spent 6 months doing our due diligence. Me going to corporate at the time was in Dallas and meeting with them and kind of learning the ins and outs. And with 2 loans and dumping some 401k money in, here we are 10 years later, debt-free. And I feel like it's just been awesome. I've changed so many lives. My team has changed so many lives, and that's what makes it fun.
What a fascinating story. I love the background, because what most people won't see until they do a little deeper dive is you coming from the higher education, you're really teaching hiring authorities and candidates how to interview. And people won't realize that. I mean, it's something, I thought it was a sales job. Okay, yes, it's a sales job. But the reality is, you know this as well as anybody. There is no candidate out there that knows how to interview.
True.
There is no hiring authority out there that knows how to interview. But you're from the higher education. You got the opportunity to truly build relationships on teaching people how to interview. Different concept?
I suppose that's a good way of looking at it. I hadn't really thought about it that way.
Boy, I tell you, it's something that I have really embraced, because if we can teach people how to interview, we have suddenly built a bridge with those individuals that no other recruiting specialist has. Most recruiters are just out to make a buck. They think they want to build a relationship with the hiring authority, somewhat with the candidate, but the reality is, what do we give them? We find them a job?
Hopefully.
Exactly.
That's the goal, but we can't.
We find a hiring authority a solution. It's just a different way. So I'm excited about what's your experience been with your educational upbringing. Coming into this business, what do you feel you bring that's different than anybody in the recruiting agency business? What gives you that upper hand?
It's a good question. What gives me the upper hand in the recruiting industry coming from education? I'm gonna really rely on my team here because yes, in the beginning it was just me and a couple of people. I have had some transactional recruiters in our firm over the years. They did not last because that's not how we roll. You are right. The recruiting industry at times can have a bad rap from people that just want to make a buck and do it quick and send a resume and not build a relationship. And I'm not speaking just to me, I'm speaking about my team and our firm and how we do things. We are very relationship based. The digital noise out there is unreal right now. As you know, everybody knows, and the tools are good and it's good to use them. But at the end of the day, it's all about relationships, whether it's with the candidate, your leaders in your companies, your executive partners. As you know, 2024 and into 2025 has been a little bit rougher on the recruiting industry. And I seriously was thinking this morning about that and talking to my colleagues that one of the reasons we have stayed afloat, so to speak, and stayed above the bar is because of our relationships with people. Every candidate that calls in here, right now it's kind of rough because there's a lot of frustrated job seekers out there that are getting ghosted and we don't have a job for everybody, as you know. But we try to give a nugget of something to make them feel like they have walked away with something of value. And they do have a little bit of a relationship. Most of our candidates don't ghost my recruiters nor our clients because there is that relationship there. I don't know that I can take credit for that, but I am a very relationship-based person, and I went into this business very intentionally with that relationship piece. And yeah, I think it's carried us through very well for 10 years.
So how has the landscape of recruiting evolved since you've come on board within Northern Colorado as a whole, not just for your company?
Right. Wow. It's one of the biggest changes I've seen in my career, is the way that people hire and apply for jobs, et cetera. So when we first started this, I bought it from a very wonderful person who started it back here in 1997. He was ready to retire. So we had a good reputation. We have a good reputation in the area and did at the time. We've grown it exponentially, but where was I going with that? So when we bought in, we had an old antiquated applicant tracking system that the former ownership had never put a resume in it. Like we walked in and there was paper, there were file cabinets everywhere. And I think that was still kind of the lay of the land. I remember, and this has only been 10 years, Vince, but paper, everything, checklists, paper resumes, nothing was really that digital. Same goes for like employers hiring and candidates applying. Everything was through Indeed or Craigslist. We posted a job and we prayed. We posted and prayed. Or people walked in and we would try to get them a job that way. There was none of this recruiting passive talent, things like that. Maybe there was, but not in my world because I was still kind of fresh and didn't really know what it all looked like. So evolving from paper and people applying for jobs to, we do still post jobs on occasion, but we also use many not inexpensive tools to recruit passive candidates. That is a huge difference. From the candidate viewpoint, what I hear is, in generally speaking, 10 years ago, people would speak to everybody that walked in the door. They would give them the time of day. And now these poor people, these candidates they don't get replies. They don't even get a reply for an online application. So the digital noise is a big part of what has changed. There's good and bad with it, in my opinion. That's kind of the gist of what I've seen in the hiring industry from an employer candidate standpoint in 10 years.
Boy, there's so much I could say to what you just brought up.
I know, right?
I mean, it's one of those things where you're right. You hit it right on the head. And what I see is it's causing, forgive this word, and I'm talking generalistically like you were, it's causing laziness by our candidates. I think our candidates are relying on the digital. And my dad once told me when I was a teenager, you want a job? He says, go pound on the door and sit on the doorstep until the only way they can get rid of you is hire you.
That's good advice, Dad.
Exactly. And now this was back in the 60s. And I was, you transform that into today. The thing that has changed today is I think candidates are afraid to pick up the phone.
I would agree. And they're afraid to walk in as well.
Exactly. And so I'm coaching a young fellow right now. He just called me yesterday. His father was a friend of mine that recruited back in the 80s and the 90s. And, or his grandfather, I should say. And it's interesting. He says, gosh, I'm just sending out resumes like crazy. I says, that's what you're doing wrong. Now he's applying. He lives in Illinois. He's applying in Florida. I says, that's what you're doing wrong. You're doing everything that the Dunkin' Donuts and the Krispy Kreme donuts and those people are doing to try and get the same job you are, and they're not qualified.
Right.
Pick up the telephone, call the manager, and develop a grabber. Hello, recruiter. Develop a grabber that gets their attention so you can have a conversation with them.
Absolutely. I just had somebody do that this morning. He walked in yesterday, was very professional, and he called to follow up today. And, it's sticking with me because you just don't see that anymore. So I really want to help this man because I'm so impressed with his professionalism and follow-up, because you're right. You just don't see that much anymore.
Now, I'm going to challenge you just a little bit here. How often do you push your team to coach their candidates that they can't help to do that?
They're naturals at it because they want to help everyone. I'm so fortunate in that regard. But they do. I have a recruiter. They're all rock stars. He's a little bit younger. And just watching him develop over the past 4 years and being able to really coach people, whether or not he's going to submit them to a client, he gives them advice on what to say, what not to say. Maybe next time you should do this. And it just comes naturally. And I think it's been really fun watching his confidence grow in that. And we are not afraid to do that. We want to help people. And if it requires a little bit of constructive criticism, we ask if they're open to it. And almost always they are. And they're very appreciative.
Trish, you and your team are destined for greatness.
Well, thank you.
They really are. Well, you're giving back to it. You're not just taking, you're giving back to the system, to the people. And you hit it. That's why you're so focused on building relationships, because even the can't helps, someday, they could be a hiring authority or a candidate.
And it's happened. It has happened. Even if we didn't get them hired somewhere, they remember how they were treated and they remember to call us. It's just been really fun to watch the exponential relationships grow, or the relationships grow exponentially over this 10 years. One of my recruiters has been with me almost from day one, almost 10 years. And just the people that we reminisce about, and we pick up the phone. It's like, you remember 10 years ago when we hired you at X company? And, they call us when they have a hiring need. It's very satisfying and rewarding to see that evolution over time.
Oh, that's wonderful. So that leads me to my next question. You've been doing this for 10 years. Is there one placement that your team or you have been involved in that really changed the direction of your client?
That's a good question. Actually, yes, I do have one in mind. So we've worked with an engineering firm probably 7 or 8 years now, hiring electronic techs, engineers, things like that for them. We actually went and did a face-to-face meeting with them. We try to do that at least once a year, even though they're an hour and a half away. Again, one of those things like you're like, oh, it's going to take half a day to do this. But when you get back, it's like so rewarding and the relationship is just that much stronger. So it was worth it. But anyway, back to the original question. About 3 years ago, we hired somebody there as a drafter. The guy had some things on his background that he didn't share with us until he got hired there. And so then we had to kind of navigate that discussion with the client. And he did that on his own accord. When we went and visited last week, he's been a member of their team for 3 years. He is one of the happiest people in the world to have been given this chance. And he's a big part of them growing from 30 people to 50. It's just been very, very satisfying to watch. There's a million stories like that, but that's the first one that came to mind because I saw him again last week, and it's just so rewarding.
That's amazing that we get to touch lives like that. And hey, they don't all work out like that.
No.
But the ones that do, to your point, they just make this all worthwhile,
They do.
Doesn't it?
They do. As you know, in this recruiting world, there's a lot of downs, a lot of losses, probably more so than the wins. So it's always, I think we are very much glass half full. We're able to remind ourselves of the difference we've made in people's families and their lives and their careers. And it feels good.
Yeah, it's a sales business.
Totally.
I mean, somebody once told me that you can't put a percentage on anything because percentages are just self-justifications for what you're about to say. But what you just said, I don't challenge or channel to negativity. It's rejection. We hear no way more than we hear yes.
Oh, absolutely.
And the people that succeed in this business are the ones that can persevere, that realize, hey, no is a decision. And what we're in the game for isn't necessarily about placements. It's about getting decisions.
True.
The sooner you tell me no, you're going to do it anyway.
And it saves our resources and time and more heartache. So just tell me no if that's what the answer is going to be.
Exactly. I love that. So you joined at a really interesting time in the recruiting world. You come in, you're learning a new business, and 5 years later, COVID hit.
Oh, yeah. Never forget that year.
Yeah.
No one will.
No, that's true. But clearly you persevered through it. Following COVID, and you touched on this a little bit from last year coming into this year, following COVID, most businesses, recruiting businesses, had banner years.
Absolutely.
Because the companies had to fulfill the needs that they had lost. So what have you focused on after that whirlwind tidal wave of hiring? We'll call it at different levels, but whirlwind, a tidal wave of hirings. It's led us to this hiccup right now. What are you having your team focus on that may be a little bit different than what they were doing a year and a half ago?
It's a good question. A year and a half ago, when things were booming, the phone would ring and we would have an order and we would fill it within a few days. And it was just a different whirlwind of time, right? It's very different now. Now you have to go find the business along with every other competitor in your area. I have a great salesperson who goes out, business development person. And she said, I go into this company and I'm the third staffing company of the day to visit them. So we try to differentiate ourselves. One of the things that we do to differentiate ourselves is kind of focus on the small, family-owned, local company that we are. We aren't the Adecos. We aren't the Aerotechs. We aren't the Manpowers. You're going to get a different value from us. And if you just give us a chance, you'll know. You'll know that instantly because we communicate. And we have the same people here for years. I have a 10-year recruiter, a 7-year recruiter, a 5-year manager, and a 4-year recruiter. So when somebody picks up the phone and calls us and they haven't talked to us in a couple of years, well, I should back up, Vince. We try to talk to them often. Whether or not they are able to talk to us is a different story. But when the time is right, they've heard our voice several times a year, if not more. They remember how they were treated. They know the value that our smaller firm brings and how fast we can work. We don't go through corporate red tape. And I'm sure you hear this a lot from our family of firms that we all work with. It's so nice to be able to have that quick decision and pivot and do things custom to the client, not just like a big corporate agreement that's 10 pages long. If you can't pay in 30 days and you want to do 45, we can do that for you. We're able to customize. I think that and the family owned and the local, we really push local.
Well, and it sounds like you're doing probably more face-to-face than your competition does too.
Starting to get back into it. As you know, it took a couple of years before people would even let you back into their office. So that's when all the digital stuff started, and the email campaigns, and definitely the phone calls. But we are back out there. We make an intentional visit to our clients, especially our larger ones, several times a year, bring them lunch, whatever it is you need to do. My business development person's out today, getting face-to-face with them and not relying on digital marketing. I mean, digital marketing is a great supplemental tool. But again, I hate to be a broken wheel, but it's the relationships. And it's a very different relationship to do something in person or face-to-face like you and I are versus a phone call or a mass email.
And I want to expand on that just a little bit. And I want our listeners to hear this because you coined it so perfectly. Ladies and gentlemen, digital is a great supplemental tool. Pick up the phone or go visit them face to face.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It should not be the primary tool. And I think a lot of people, because it's the bright, shiny new objects that are coming out, everybody wants to try it. We've done it. We've tried them all, and we still do use some. Definitely. You have to adopt this. But it cannot be your Jamie Close mentioned this last week, I believe it was. It cannot be your primary outreach. It can be your supplemental outreach.
It's a tool. We all have tools.
Mm-hmm. The best
when
tool
I
we
started
have
in
is
this
ourselves.
business, exactly. When I started in this business, the most profound tool that came out and was going to revolutionize the business was the fax machine.
Half of my people don't even know what that is, but I do remember the paper rolling off of the fax machine.
Exactly. We were going to go out of business because of fact everybody could just fax their resumes in. Nothing's changed in 40 years. I mean, you still got to have that relationship, and you can't do it by technology. You can't do it.
I agree with you completely.
How do you keep your people from relying on technology moving forward?
Especially the young, I hate to keep going back to the younger ones, and I'm sure that that's not HR appropriate, but they're the first ones to adopt it and think it's the bright, shiny object. And it's a lot of harping on, let's look at these email campaigns. Yes, you've had 60% open it. How many have replied? 2%. If the ones that have opened it got a phone call or face-to-face visit from you, that's going to be the game changer. So I think it's a lot of pulling the old school back in, Vince. I think you can relate with me on that. There's nothing like old school face-to-face phone calls.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I agree with you 100%, but I don't put it into an age. I put it into
Good point.
Because there is I had 2 20-year recruiters that worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
And when we went remote, it suddenly became so much easier to rely on digital because I didn't get my feelings hurt as much when they hung up on me. It was a lot easier to send out, to your point, 60 contacts, right? Not hear from 80% of them, made up number.
Right.
and the ones that I did hear from were probably rejections, but it didn't hurt me because I didn't have any effort involved in it.
Spot on.
So I'm loving this conversation.
Rejection's hard. It's one of the hardest things humans have to deal with. And in this business, as you know, it's probably 80% of your day. And it's a lot easier to get somebody just to ignore your email. It's a lot easier to get through that than it is for them to hang up on you or say no, that kind of thing. You're absolutely spot on.
Yeah. I guess the one thing, and I guess I'm a little different this way because the only time rejection hurt was when it was with a love interest.
Okay. I've been there a few times.
Business, get frustrated. Don't get me wrong. I get frustrated with the rejection there. It just means I got to dial the phone more. I mean, today you're told dial the phone 40 times a day. Good Lord, do you know if you dial the phone 40 times and nobody answers, you're an hour and a half into your day at best.
And
what are you going to do for the rest of the day? Most people go to digital instead of muscling through. That's awesome. So how has technology truly helped transform your business? Because we've kind of pushed it aside, but how has it truly helped transform your business?
Oh my gosh. Well, we couldn't live without it. And over 10 years, it has definitely improved. We've been through a couple of applicant tracking systems. I'm about to move to another one. It has definitely, I think probably the biggest impact, Vince, that technology has brought to us in 10 years is you can do a lot more with less bodies, less people. A little side shoot of that is profit is not the same because everything costs so much more. So it's not like you have less employees and it's more profitable. It's still the same, but there's just so much more we can do, and I feel like we can do it better. The research is easier. The helping write good things and templates and things like that using ChatGPT, Bard, that kind of thing is it's a wonderful thing, but you can't rely on it solely. You have to edit it. So technology, it's amazing. I mean, I don't even know how we function. I think back to my first real job out of college in the 90s. Like, how did we function? We did have a computer. I had a computer, but I don't really remember what it did. We didn't really have email back then. You still had to pick up the phone and call, and you had to go out to the warehouse to get something shipped, and fax machines. And yeah, very different over the course of life.
Whoa, because we didn't have technology when I started. We had 3x5 yellow cards.
It's changed a lot, hasn't it?
It has. So how are you adapting to AI?
Well, it's very exciting. It's also a little bit scary. We do use it. It's actually integrated in so many of our platforms now over the past year or two. We all use it, but we are all very much use your brain, edit. We use it for helping to format a resume that somebody sends in that's kind of not in a great format. We use it for researching. We use it for, obviously, campaigns, email campaigns, things like that. We use it to help us think of a better way to say something. But again, I still feel like we do that collaboratively as well. I don't feel like we rely on it as much as some, possibly. That's my hope anyway. But again, it's one of those things that's going to transform the world and the workplace and probably the number of employees that people need.
So tell me what you think of this opinion. I agree with everything you just said because I use it too.
Okay.
I mean, I get it, but I do exactly what you just professed. I get something back to me and then I make it me.
Exactly.
How are we going to teach people to understand that what AI truly is, it's not the solution. It should inspire the idea to the solution. Do you agree with that?
Completely. It's your assistant. It's your, definitely. And having been an educator, I have serious concerns about our kids learning to write because of these tools. And that's very scary to me. I remember back when I was still teaching, back when the internet was, kind of a new thing. And the way I'd see if anybody plagiarized is I'd just take a little part of their paper, pop it in there and see if it came up as plagiarized. Well, now I don't know how these educators do it, but it's, I hope everybody still learns to use their brain and uses as an inspirational point. That's what I try to preach on here. And that's what I use it for. If I'm stuck and I just can't quite think of the right way to say it, it'll help me. But what it spits out is not my tone. It's not my voice. I have to change that to make it me. And I think you're spot on with that point. I do think my team is very good at that as well. I don't see anything go out that looks robotic, but I see things that come to me that are very robotic and ChatGPT written and probably not even looked at or edited. I'm sure you get a zillion of those emails a day too.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, as you were just talking, it harkened me back to before you were twinkling in your parents' eyes, the calculator. People don't know how to work mathematics anymore.
I still use
They push it
mine.
into a button. Exactly.
It's right
They
here on
push
my desk.
and of course, that happened when I was still in school. Calculator, Texas Instruments calculators were coming out.
They were hard to use back then.
Exactly. And I always thought they were cheating because they were using calculators. But that's the same thing you're talking about today of being able to write. It's a shortcut to writing. And if we keep teaching our kids, and I hope I'm getting to your heart here, if we keep teaching our kids to take the easy way, are we really moving forward?
It's a scary thought. It's a very scary thought. If they don't learn to think for themselves, where are we going to be in 10 or 20 years as a society?
Before we wrap things up, a couple questions for you. How do you measure, not in dollars and cents, how do you measure success in your organization?
Well, this year it's definitely not dollars and cents. Other years it has helped, but how do we measure success in our organization right now? You know, to be perfectly honest, because there are so many lows right now, more so than highs, I think a lot of our successes we have to find from within. So one of the things we do daily is, what are your 3 wins for the day? What could you have done differently? You have to find the success right now. It doesn't just walk in the door to you. We even little things like we find a really good passively recruited candidate who gets back to you. That is a success in and of itself. So I think in this day and time, during this kind of weird employment landscape, at least for us, we are just naturally looking for the internal successes that we each have each day. It's not always about making that placement. It's about having a great conversation with somebody, or finding that great couple of candidates to submit for a very purple unicorn job, which we all have right now. So yeah, it's definitely going to be what you find within yourself that makes you feel successful.
So Trish, obviously the last several months have been challenging.
Yes.
You worked your tail off. You're making things happen. You got a great team working with you. But personally, what do you do to let go of it, either at night or over the weekends?
That's a good question. What do I do to let go of it? And that's interesting because the first few years of business ownership, I don't think I ever turned it off. I'm looking at my emails. I'm looking at and I'm working on Sunday night to get caught up for Monday. And when things took the downturn a couple years ago, I realized I had to take a break. Weekends, unless it's dire, I don't look at email. Sometimes Sunday night, I'll kind of knock some things out and things like that. But I very much focus on, I love my animals, my family. I'm lucky that most of my grown kids live around here. So we get together with them. In the summers, we go boating. We go out to eat with our friends. We just try to decompress and get away from the thoughts of business. Not as easy during the week at night, but 5 o'clock, I'll have a glass of wine and think, gee, what am I going to make for dinner tonight? I enjoy cooking, and just hanging out with my dogs and exercising and walking. And I encourage my team to do the same thing. It's very difficult right now because, as you know, you have to probably output 3 times what you did in 2022 to get the even remotely same results. So in some people's mind, that means working harder, not smarter, and working longer hours. And I think that's something we have to really watch our internal teams because the burnout factor is very real. And everybody needs a break. So yeah. And my husband and I do a few vacations a year. That's always something to look forward to. Things like that. And I make sure that my team takes time off and they're enjoying the ski season here in Colorado. And it just rejuvenates you to get away from it and get it out of your head for a day or two.
Trish, I really want to thank you for taking the time today.
Oh, thank you, Vince.
This has just been so enjoyable. For somebody that's been in this business 10 years, you brought me back to when I got into this business because it hasn't changed. And you're so on track. You're so focused. You've got such a grasp of what's going on. Don't let the negativity in. Just keep teaching. Just keep teaching.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate that advice. And you're right. It's glass half full. For sure.
Right on. Well, thank you again.
Thank you, Vance.